Hey folks, this is Nate coming at you. As I hope most of you have seen today, Brian Kornacker of BK Saber Sounds just put out a really good comparison video centered around testing the efficacy of SaberTrio's new customized 22mm Veco speaker. Now you've seen me do a couple of compare videos that I did when I was doing sort of an overall review of my Vektra, and then I did a part 2 where I compared my Vektra sound quality against a 28mm Smuggler's Outpost. Spoiler alert, it doesn't hold up against a Smuggler's Outpost 28mm. But with that being said, Brian's comparison video, he basically did something a little different where he purchased extra SaberTrio 22mm Veco speakers, and he installed them into 3 different hilts, 3 different non-SaberTrio hilts, and then he tested those 3 hilts against other speakers installed into those same hilts. So, and he did it specifically against smaller size other speakers. So he did the Veco test against a standard 22mm Veco, then he did SaberTrio's Veco speaker test against a 24mm Smuggler's Outpost Elite, and then I think he did it against another type of 24mm. So anyway, it was a really good comparison. He went through all of the different bells and whistles, and what I figured I would do here is I would just do my own sort of anecdotal part 3 to sort of buttress what Brian's results found out, which was that this new SaberTrio 22mm Veco speaker sounds really, really good in SaberTrio's installs, and in other Sabers, outside non-SaberTrio Sabers, it doesn't hold up to the hype that SaberTrio was pushing. And what I have here that I'm about to show you is a perfect example of both what Brian found out and what I found out when I actually got a hold of an extra 22mm Veco speaker from SaberTrio, and I asked my installer guy to install it into my 05 hilt. So this is my custom airbore hilt. Most of you who see videos on my channel, you will have seen me demo this a little while back when it got finished, when it got installed. So recently, when I ordered my Vektra, I asked SaberTrio if I could purchase an extra 3 speakers, and they were kind enough to sell them to me separately. So those came along when this Saber got delivered. And then what I did was, this had already been installed, and so I asked my installer, Charles Ivanova, if I could send this back down to him with a Veco speaker, because this only takes a 22. And I asked him if he could install the Veco into this Saber, and he was happy to do it. So he did that, sent it back to me a couple of weeks ago. Now, the sound quality on this one is slightly improved over the 22 that was in here before, but not by much. It doesn't sound nearly as loud and clear and rich as the 22 Veco that's in this one, and they are exactly the same speaker. So, let me show you what the sound difference is. So first, and just to make everything clear, this is a SaberTrio that I purchased from, this is SaberTrio Vektra. I purchased this from SaberTrio during their Black Friday sale in November of 2021. This was the first sale that SaberTrio did, where they released their custom 22mm Veco speakers in all of their new installs. So this is that batch of their first round of those installs. This has a 22mm Veco speaker in it, and you can see how it's installed. It's installed quite, a little bit differently. It has this really, really thick containment, and I'm going to speak on that a little bit later in this video, right? So this is SaberTrio's proprietary chassis and saber. And this is my AfayProps Zero5 hilt that had a custom install by my regular installer. who did a proffie install on this with a SaberTrio 22mm Veco speaker. And this is SaberTrio's custom 22mm Veco speaker. Okay? So you can see there's nothing, this is a very standard speaker install. Nothing out of the ordinary about that. And this 05 installs, the install style looks a lot like a flagship, except the ID, the inner diameter of the hilt, is just a little bit bigger than the flagship, from what I'm told. So anyway, both of the proffie configs on these sabers are set to the same volume setting. They're both set to 1750, and these are both 3-watt 4-ohm speakers. It's the exact same speaker, and they're both set to the same sound font. This is the Nazgul sound font from Fours. Okay, so this is SaberTrio's pre-built.
Battery power level.
Whoops.
It is not.
Hello there. Do not come between the Nazgul and his prey.
Okay, same speaker, different saber. Okay, so you can clearly tell that this saber is at least 30 to 40% louder than this one, right? Same speaker, exact same. Okay, very, very, I don't want to say drastic, but there is a clear difference in loudness. Now, I will say that the clarity of the sound and the clarity of the tone and the richness of the sound is the same, I would say, but the loudness difference is very, very discernible. So with that said, I think Brian's test that he did with those 3 different non-SaberTrio hilts, testing this speaker against other comparable speakers on the market in size, I think was really, really helpful in helping other folks understand just how much marketing played a role in SaberTrio's claims about the performance of this speaker. I'm going to venture to assume a couple of things here first. So first one is that I think SaberTrio was trying to play a little bit of upfront damage control in sort of quelling people's concerns about shipping all of their sabers with a smaller speaker, right? Because most people really like having loud sabers. They like having the, you know, that richness and that clarity and that loudness. And I think a lot of people were very skeptical out of the gate at paying the same amount of money for a saber that no longer had a 28 millimeter but now would have a 22 millimeter. That's a valid concern, and I think SaberTrio initially tried to do as best they could to sort of quell people's fears about the about maintaining that same level of quality. Okay. Point number two, and this is where my assumption comes in, is that I think they make a mistake in trying to market the speaker as a better speaker than it was, when what they were really doing was simply making improvements on the construction and design of their chassis to make better use of a 22 millimeter speaker. And I'll give you an example here. I think, and please bear in mind, folks, I'm not an installer. I know very little about electronics, and I know very little about Saber electronics specifically. But I'm going to venture to say that a lot of SaberTrio's improvements that they did had less to do with the design of the speaker and more to do with the design and how the speaker is embedded in the chassis, and essentially amplifying the power of the speaker in this type of chassis design. And I think the value that SaberTrio found was coming up with a chassis design that could use a smaller speaker that they could fit in across the board uniformly in all of their sabers. And I think this was helping them to address a problem that they've had historically, where different size sabers would take different size speakers, thus leading to different sound quality. And I think the construction of this specific 22 millimeter Veco speaker for SaberTrio had more to do with being able to create a uniform chassis that they could put in all of their sabers regardless of ID, and have a consistently good sound quality coming out of all of them, right? So I'm going to make that assumption and say that I think what they should have done was marketed the fact that they were building a better chassis and not try and play it off like they were designing a better speaker. Because as Brian clearly was able to test, and as I was able to find for myself, the speaker that they partnered up with to help create is not better than other speakers that are on the market as a standalone component. If you take this SaberTrio 22 millimeter Veco speaker and install it in another Saber, it will not sound any better than other speakers that are comparable to it in size. Okay, and it does not sound better than a 28 millimeter Smuggler's Outpost. And as Brian actually validated in these non-SaberTrio sabers, a 24 millimeter Smuggler's Outpost speaker Elite is better, sounds better than this in a non-SaberTrio saber. So thanks again for watching, y'all. I hope this was some helpful information. And also to the SaberTrio folks, you know, we still love your products, love your service, love your website. You're a great company. I still highly recommend SaberTrio. They make great sabers. But I think this particular issue constituted a marketing blunder on their part. And I hope maybe they can learn some lessons from this in the future when they try and do these sort of silent upgrades to their saber manufacturing process. So anyway, thanks as always, y'all, for watching. May the force be with you, and we'll see you on the next one.